Good morning and welcome to the Tuesday, January 18th, 2022, 9 o'clock CEO board briefing with the Board of County Commissioners. All three commissioners are present. Thank you. We're going to start off today with a presentation from Gil, Hubert, Bruce Russell, Todd Milkey, briefing on the Spokane on the small arms range bid results. So I'm not sure who wants to start. So Bruce, looks like you. So I'll let you start, Bruce. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner. I'll jump in. We opened bids last Thursday for the small arms range project. And I have to say that they came in extremely nicely. The bids were much lower than what we were anticipating. And I sent over a bid tabulation form for you guys. I don't know if Ron can get that up. This is Todd will have to talk to this slide. I'm not sure what all that involves.
We're looking for the bid tabulation sheet right now.
Yeah.
So just 1 second.
Okay. But yeah, the bids came in actually closer to what we were anticipating 2 years ago than what we anticipated now. So,
That's
and
great.
they came in great. We had three bids, and they were all very well-known local contractors. So I think any one of these guys would do us a wonderful job. So what you'll end up seeing on there is the three bidders were Leidig, Walker, and Graham. And depending on which alternates we take, it will tell you who is the low bidder. There you go. So if you're looking at the overall package, the low bidder would be Walker Construction. Their base bid, which is just that portion of the project that is shared with the Air Force, came in at $19,985,000. And then alternate one, which is to add the Sheriff's Office Training Center portion, was another 6.3 million. And then alternates 2 through 5 are the fueling station, the training tower, the shoot house, and the K9 training. I mean, they all, if you add them all up for using Walker as the basis, you know, their low bid with tax came in at 30,174,000. And the most recent cost estimate from our design team just for base bid was 28 million. So to do the whole package, we're only 2 million over what their most recent cost estimate was.
Wow.
Yeah, it came out great.
And that's great considering that, you know, costs on supplies and everything these days. So
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And every one of these people said that they could meet our time frame. So that's good. And then the next document I sent over to you guys was an estimate of project costs. This does not include things like bond fees or anything like that. This is just my design and construction related costs. And Ron, if you can pull up that, it's a 3-page deal. There you go. What I've done is I've given 3 different summaries. One which is base bid only, one which is base bid plus alternate one, and then one which is base bid and all the alternates. And so what this highlights is what our design related costs are and what the construction related costs are. And then if you scroll down just a little bit more, you can kind of see the overall project costs from my perspective. There is other costs involved that Todd can speak to, like I mentioned, things like bond fees and that type of thing that I don't really get into. But the number that I have highlighted in yellow is what I would need to move forward with the construction portion of this project. So that includes all the different service fees that we have, my tests and inspections, permits, you know, all of that stuff. So those are the numbers that I have to be looking at to be able to move forward. So you can see here For base bid only, we're looking at about just under 25 million, so it's 24.7. And if we go to the next page to do the base bid plus alternate one, which is the shared space plus the sheriff only space, we're at 32.1 million. And then the next slide, which is base bid plus all alternates, we're looking at 33.8. So basically that's kind of where we're at on this. We have, technically, according to the invitation to bid, we have 60 days in which we can hold these bidders to these numbers. The only thing I want to caution about that is because of our time frame of having the Air Force use this facility by October 1 of 2023, we're really pushing our time frame. Every one of these bidders said they could meet our time frame, but if we delay, if we wait the full 60 days, I think that may change. Just because, as you mentioned, Commissioner Cooney, with the delay in getting materials and those kinds of things, any delay we have could potentially delay our October 1 of 23 deadline.
Thank you. I see Commissioner French has raised his hand.
Yeah, Bruce, in the 33,817, that does not include sales tax, is that right?
It does include sales tax.
It does include it, okay.
Yes.
And then were any of the bids, did they have any qualifiers with regard to supply chain delays or price increases or anything like that, or was it a clean bid?
It was a clean bid. We did
Okay.
offer, per our last meeting on this project, we offered them, we put in the invitation to bid that we encourage them to purchase product as soon as possible, and we could store it either on site or in a bonded warehouse somewhere. And then we also offered them that early completion incentive, which I've got included on this chart here. We offered them $2,500 per day to a maximum of $60,000.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
So I guess, this will be, I'll let you finish this presentation. I have a few more questions, but I'll wait till the end.
And I've got another summary slide as well for people to look at.
Right. Basically what you've seen so far is what I put together. And I know Todd's going to weigh in on some of the other components of this. But for me, what I'm looking for is my main purpose in today was to present this to you guys so that we can get an idea of how you want to move forward with this. If you want to consider different alternates, that kind of thing, because that actually is going to help determine who we would award this to, because all the bids are really pretty close. And the way the bid is set up, or the way the invitation to bid is set up, is we award to the low bidder based on base bid plus alternates chosen. So depending on which alternates you guys would choose to move forward with, will tell us who's the low bidder really.
Yeah, no, I understand that. No, thank you.
You bet.
Commissioner French?
Yeah, Bruce, in your at the bottom of your tally sheet there, you've got a 5% construction contingency, and then you've got an escalation cost of 2.5%. If this is a fixed bid, what's the escalation cost attributable to?
I just threw that in there mainly as a precaution to cover anything, like if we see a huge spike in cost increase on a material somewhere. It's likely, because we've already seen it, where contractors are coming back to us later on saying, hey, I just can't get a product for this price. I don't really anticipate that happening with these guys, but I'm just trying to make sure our bases are covered.
So if I might, in the Bernardo Wills estimate, because of the length of the construction period, they usually put a midpoint escalation line in their estimate. And then that continued through our most recent Clark Nexon, most recent design architect as well. So that line in there, the escalation cost, is the anticipation. It's the midpoint escalation for the construction period, is what it is.
It could also cover things like if prevailing wages get increased sometime in the next 18 months, which occasionally happens, it would help offset some of those increases as well.
But the contractors, the contractors actually know that and put that in their bid when they're doing it. So
Right.
even at this point on the escalation cost, that should already have been decided by the contractor. That's their risk that they've chosen as they bid these items.
You're absolutely right. I'm just trying to make sure that I don't want to get to the 1 yard line and find out we don't have the funds available to finish.
Well, that was the nature of my question is this a fixed cost bid or are there opportunities for the contractor to escalate it over a period of time?
Well, it is fixed costs.
So if it is fixed costs, then I agree with Commissioner Cooney. Escalation costs are already included in the bid, so why are we double counting that?
Okay, well, I can easily take that out, guys.
So if we can jump over to my slide.
And I would just state that we don't want to have those in there because then that gives the opportunity for the contractor to think that potentially they are there when it is a fixed cost bid. Those should go away at this point in time. Because, okay, I just want to understand too. So it's fully designed. So they're bidding off a full design, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So one thing I do want to emphasize though is these are preliminary numbers. I mean, we know we just got bids. We just did the bid opening at the end of the day last Thursday. And then with yesterday being a holiday, we wanted to get to you as best we could what we saw as preliminary numbers. But I know in working with Tess in the budget office, we still want to go through and crunch numbers and make sure that we're getting rid of duplication and cleaning up the assumptions, making sure that we haven't forgotten anything. And like I said, Ron, I don't know if you're able to get to the slide I emailed you.
Todd, I would just say that, yeah, these are basically what I would consider an engineer's estimate.
Right.
And now we have the hard bid numbers. So,
right, and I think the slide that I have shows you where we were when we last talked about this in November. Here we go. So what you have before you is in the first column, and again, we need to spend this week working with the budget office and with Bruce to make sure that we've eliminated the duplications, we've taken care of all the issues and really narrowed it down. So something that I did is that first column that you see on the left, the 50 million, that was the number that we presented to you in November, broken down with the costs as, like I say, with the design related costs, the design architect, the fixtures and furnishings for the county, and then basically what the cost was for the indoor firing range, the SAR, known as the base bid in these discussions, and then as well as the training center. And as a caveat, we should point out that in none of the bids, since we are still trying to work through the land issue, none of the bids incorporated the cost of the EVOC course. So, so that's not included in the numbers that you see. If you look at the column to the far right, and that is the one that, like I say, we need to do our due diligence this week to make sure there's no duplication. You can kind of see what we ended up with. We assumed almost $30 million for the SAR base bid in November. And as Bruce has pointed out, and one thing I should say in the far right column, what I did is I looked at the three bids and I took the highest number for each one. So for example, the base bid, I took the highest number of all three bids for the base bid. For the training center and the alternates, I took the highest number for each element to know what would be our maximum exposure. And so, So that's what you see in the far right column is where did we come in with regard to the small arms firing range. And you'll see that we came in almost 10 million less than what we anticipated in early November. In the training center, we're a little bit closer when you note the fact that the EVOC course is not included in any of these bids. But even then, we're still 2.5 to 3 million less than what we expected back in November. Fixtures and furnishings are the same. Design related costs are basically the same. And then we have other construction related costs that we built into the assumption. And again, that deserves a discussion between the budget office and Bruce and us to make sure we're not double counting or anything like that. And so this was kind of my preliminary review based on the bid opening last Thursday, late afternoon, some review of some numbers on Friday that we did with the Air Force, and then some more number crunching yesterday. But now I'm at a point where, again, need to clean it up, refine it, and make sure that that we're not duplicating. But I think what you see here is kind of the best / worst case scenario. I tried to take the highest number in every category and list it. And so I do know that 43,921 most likely has some duplication of numbers that we need to pull back out. But that gives you an idea of where we were in our discussion in early November at a little over 50 million to where we are today at 44 million or less. And that should include, like I said, all the soft costs as well.
So, okay, so does that include like the bonding costs and all of that, or is that
Yes.
that other construction related costs?
The bond cost was about 400,000. It's in the design related costs.
Okay.
The contingency still is in the construction related costs and the commissioning.
Okay, and so have you talked to the Air Force? Are they, I mean, so they're, 79%, is that?
77 on the construction.
Okay.
So we met with them on Friday to give them a preliminary review of the number, knowing that we still needed to sit down with Bruce and really make sure that where we were with regard to the soft costs, that we captured everything as well in the design related costs, and then see if we were missing anything in the other construction related costs. But as of Friday, the number was falling within the original expectation of the Air Force. So we did not need to amend the contract with regard to the dollar amount is what it appeared on Friday. The only discussion that we're having with the Air Force now is what we call the performance period. We were originally anticipating that their occupancy would start in October of 2022. Now it looks like it will be October 1 of 2023. And then looking at what is the performance period that they will actually be occupying the facility during their 10-year contract. So that's the discussion that we're having with them right now, is just how are we defining the performance period? Do we need to amend the contract to reflect that? Right now, the dollar amounts don't appear to need to be amended.
That's good news.
That's great news. They were elated on Friday. So, yeah. And the sheriff is here if you have any questions as well.
Scott Simmons, do you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Commissioner. So I'm trying to track, Bruce, you had showed us a chart earlier, and it indicated, I believe, based on the low bids, an amount of 35 million, is that right? 37 million, which was base bid plus alternates plus our soft costs, although you did have the construction contingency and escalation costs in there. Is that what for the commissioner's benefit is that what they're really looking at for an apples to apples comparison to our design engineer's estimate to what the bids came back at? I'm trying to track through what and compare and contrast what Todd was showing. I think I understand what Todd was showing, but I'm I'm not sure that's providing clarity for the commissioners as to what the bids are coming in at.
Right.
The biggest component that's missing is the EBOC course.
But that wasn't ever included in the bid documents, right? We
It
didn't
was
really
in
design
the,
for that.
yes, it was in the original bid documents. It was reflected in the discussion in November, but it was not, because we didn't go to design, because we haven't settled on the site, it was not incorporated in any of the bids that we received.
But it wasn't designed, right, Todd? It wasn't included in the design effort that Clark Nixon went through for us. All right?
That's correct.
Yeah,
It was,
that's what
they
I'm
were
understanding.
charged with designing it. So it was in the scoping document, but they can't design it until we have the piece of property. So it's
Okay.
always been included as an element on the training side. The issue is since it wasn't designed, the contractors could not bid on that element.
Yeah, no, I'm following that piece, but it was my understanding that wasn't even part of the original. If we roll back the clock 2 years ago, where the original estimates of 36 million were in place, was the EBOC part of that, or was it not part of it?
Yes,
Scott,
It
it's
was.
always been part of it.
Okay,
It's always been part of this project. The only reason we're hung up is the piece of property we have, we can't seem to slide it into, so we need.
okay, all right, that's helpful. So it was included in the original estimates. It's not in it wasn't designed, therefore it wasn't included in the construction costs. But there is, so you're holding it out, Todd, as a additional amount for the commissioner's awareness that weren't contemplated in the bid, the construction bids that came back.
yeah. So I want to be really careful on the terminology. It was included in the construction costs that we discussed in early November, that 50 million number. Clark Nixon, our design architect, kept saying, can you show us the property it's going to be put on so we can design it? We did not have the property defined at that time. So when it went out for bid, it was not in the bid documents. So it is in the construction costs. It is not in the bid documents.
It's in the that's what the clarity we want to have. I'm going to ask Bruce this. Bruce, was it included in our engineer's design estimates?
No.
Okay, so it's really kind of an outside kind of placeholder. We just need to have awareness of it, but we didn't have anything to design. When we do design estimates, it has to be something that we can design. So there's nothing that you can place a number on if you don't have a design for. That's why Bruce, I think, is saying that it was not included in the design estimate. It was included
It's in the Clark Nixon number.
Yeah,
It's in
let
the
me,
Clark
yeah, let
Nixon number. That has always been there. It's always been part of this project from the very beginning. The numbers have always reflected that portion of this project.
okay, let me back up here just a little bit. In the estimates that Clark Nixon were giving us throughout the design process, they were always including a number for that. But we have to be cautious with that number because they were basing that number on something that had not been yet designed. And so Todd's correct and Sheriff Knizovich is correct in that the last estimate we got from them included a placeholder number for the EVOC track, but it was I guess the best way for me to put that was that was literally just a placeholder number because they had not designed it yet. So their estimate number for that is likely not incredibly accurate.
So what the reason I'm highlighting it, Sheriff, I'm not trying to strip it out. What I'm trying to highlight for the commissioners is when they are approving the construction bidders, the low bid here, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that the EBOC was not incorporated in there and it would be a subsequent item. I don't want us to lose sight of that. So it's somewhere, Bruce and Todd, it would be important for you to have be able to pull all this stuff together show what our original construction estimates are. What are the commissioners approving when they get to the point of approving it? What's part of the entire project still that's not part of that this construction bid that we just received back?
That's correct. So the number that I'm providing in the slide that I did, the roughly 43 plus million, is if you wanted to go out and bond the entire project, how much would you be talking about bonding? I think the issue with regard to the discussion on the bidders, the three companies we have before us, is a portion of the overall project. Meaning, recognizing that there's still an element that we need to put out for bid, which is the EBike course, that would complete the project.
Thank you. Any other questions? So I guess you're going to be, these are the bids. We have 60 days, but we don't want to take 60 days. I completely understand that and get that. And so you're going to be looking at these numbers and kind of culling them more thoroughly to show where we really need to be based on the bid. And if we, the different, if we do, I guess, base bid or, include everything and know what the total is. Or are you looking for the commissioners to give you a head nod? But I guess we need to know what those numbers really come out to be.
Right.
As we move forward.
In my perfect world, I guess what I would do is have our facilities team, our budget team, and a couple of us really work hard on crunching numbers this week, come back with a more refined set of numbers to you next week with the ability to make a recommendation on awarding a bid for what you have before you. That would be my perfect world scenario, is that we could come back with a recommendation. I think the most important thing for today is whether you're looking at how much you need to bond for or the bidders on what we have so far, is we're in a much better place today than we were in November. And I think that's the thing that we really need to celebrate. And like I say, hopefully we will be ready to make a recommendation back to you about awarding a bid within hopefully next week, if not the week after, but certainly before the end of the month, so that we can move forward and meet the deadlines that I know everybody's anxious to meet.
Yes, no, very true. And I guess, with the budget, as you guys pull those numbers together, then it's part of how that's paid for and going out and ensuring that we have the commitment. Because I know that there was some concerns with the Air Force when the numbers were higher. Now that they're lower, just ensuring that, that we have that commitment, going forward, so that way we're not, on the hook for anything.
Right.
So, very good. Any other questions or comments? I think it's very exciting. Thank you very much for bringing us good news on construction costs.
Yes, really good news.
Yeah, it turned out great.
Okay, thank you. Well, hopefully you will let Scott know when we can put this on the agenda for next week, so we can start moving it forward.
Sounds
Sounds
good.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you much.
We are right on time then. It is 9:30 and I see that Mike Burgess has joined us and we are going to do a legislative update.
Hello, everyone. Let's see. I know I sent an agenda and I always know Ron. I think it's Ron pops it up on the screen here in a second. I just want to give you an update on some bills that we talked about last week. Thank you, Ron. And I assume that's Ron doing that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, it is?
It is Ron.
Okay, good. I want to thank the right person. So a lot of these are bills from that we talked about last week and have added a handful. Commissioner French had wanted an update on some of the police reform bills. I guess they'd be police reforms to the police reform bills. So we'll talk about those. But just as a general update, today is day 9 of session, day 9 of 60. Still in what we would call primarily the committee process, committee hearings virtually the entire day, But there's a handful of floor sessions going on periodically to pass some of the, bills that were left over from last year, non-controversial, or some of the ones that the majority party would like to send messages on. Amongst those is the long-term care tax bills, the delay, and then the one that expands eligibility for exemption. I would anticipate both of those to come off the House floor this week. So there's that, we did talk about those bills briefly. Just jumping into this list, 5621, that's the water sewer tax issue between the city of Spokane Valley and the rest of the folks in the county. We did have a hearing on that bill last week. I am not hopeful at this point that it will move from committee. I think that we had talked about that issue, and realistically, the success or failure of that. Myself and another colleague that's working on it are trying to come up with some other angles, maybe potentially narrowing it to Spokane County, which has been done in other legislation. That's a way to make maybe other legislators more comfortable with it, to not have the impact broader. I will tell you though, some of the things we've heard back from legislators in conversations are that this is an issue in Spokane, and that it'd be best if the community there were to solve this issue in their own discussions. I'm relaying what I've been told. I think that there's probably some fatigue there's been other issues, as you know, over the years, with recently the 911 tax issue last year. I completely understand these aren't the same issue, but in legislators' eyes, it becomes, here's Spokane again with an issue. So again, just relaying what I've heard. And if anything changes on that, I'll let you know. The hearing schedule and exec schedule for next week will come out tomorrow night. But again, I'm not certain that it will be scheduled at this point. Commissioner French.
Yeah, Mike, I've got two people that have raised their hands, so I'll have Commissioner French go first and then Casey Evans.
Yeah, so thank you. In discussions with Mike last week over a variety of different phone calls and stuff, I agree with him that I think the legislature is getting tired of the having to deal with local issues. But I would like to ask that we have an executive session to discuss options available to us. I think there are a couple of different options that I've discussed with Mr. Simmons, as well as Mr. Burgess and stuff. So if we could schedule an executive session to dial that up and have a conversation about it, it would deal with pending or potential litigation and our eventual trip to the court. Thank you.
And do you want that executive session today, or or we get it scheduled so that way I can make sure that Mike can be on that call?
It doesn't necessarily have to be today, but it would be nice to get it scheduled so that Mike could be part of the conversation and stuff. I know I discussed a number of things with him, but have not had the opportunity to discuss it with the other two commissioners, and we should have a joint approach to this as opposed to just my opinion. So, but whether we do it this afternoon or do it next week is fine.
Okay, we will work to get that scheduled then. And Casey Evans, you had a question.
Well, I was just raising my hand so Ron could add me to the meeting because I'm here with Doug Chase.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, thank you. I'll let you go on to the next topic, Mike.
Okay, the next one is this salmon habitat issue in the riparian areas, riparian. I think I'm saying that right. I sent that bill back to your staff last week. Have not heard comments back. I guess this is me saying to Jeff, let's recontact that staff and get some comments. There is a House version of that bill that's being heard. This is a very controversial issue broadly in the housing community, ag community, farming, all of those things. In addition to, there's a lot of local government impacts. The bill has already changed a bit and been narrowed, that some of the county impacts, local government impacts have been softened or removed. I will give you an anecdote. If when the bill was introduced on a scale of 1 to 10, one of my colleagues that works specifically on these types of issues with the Association of Counties comment was that his opposition level say if it started at a 10, it's been lowered to an 8.5. So just some information that the bill's getting better maybe, but still not all the way there. So I'm not advocating yet, commissioners, that you weigh in on it yet. I want to hear the county staff's analysis of it before we do that. But just know that this is something that's going to be on our list to talk about moving forward. And maybe we'll get a little more specific with some of your folks to brief you a little bit more in detail on what it does. But there's concerns about, setbacks, how that impacts housing, restoration of areas, and then, what the county is and isn't responsible for when it comes to that. On to the next one. This is the organic materials. I mentioned last week I was going to talk to Deb Geiger about this. I did that. I think it was late last week. Yeah, it would have been late last week. There's a hearing on 1799. That is the House version of this bill. So in a nutshell, this bill would require recycling of organics, household food waste, essentially. She walked me through, there's a lot of problems with this bill, just mechanically, difficult for consumers to implement. She told me just in the county that the bins are big. And so from a storage standpoint, that's something to deal with. And there's some real cost components to this as well. Our WASAC will be weighing in collectively for counties on that, but I want to provide them some support on this. So I think next week, maybe I'll ask you for a more formal position, but again, wanted to update you that there's the mechanical concerns, the implementation, and then there's cost concerns. Certainly there was an estimate, or realistically, I can't remember if it was an estimate or if it actually happened in California. They did something like this, and it raised the rates like 70% on the ratepayer. So we'll want to continue to monitor this one. It's a pretty ambitious bill. We honestly thought it was becoming next session, not this year. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
And I've got Commissioner French and then Commissioner Kearns have questions.
So Mike, when LSC was discussing this last week, I thought this was related more to landfill operations as opposed to incineration operations, because that seemed to be the tone and tenor of the conversation. So for the majority of the county, it wouldn't impact us except when they have the waste energy plant down for maintenance, then we do go to landfill and stuff, and we haul off to a variety of different other sites out of the county and stuff. But for somebody like Sunshine or some of the others that predominantly dispose of the waste through landfill, this would have a significant impact. So it would be, as you say, confusing, because some parts of the county would have to have some kind of program, other parts of the county would not. Is that a fair
Yes.
assessment or not?
That's fair, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kearns?
Mike, you said something there. You mentioned a container and that the containers being large.
Yes.
Would this bill give everybody another container at their home? Is that what you were referencing? Like we have our garbage can, the recycling bin, the yard waste bin. Would this give everybody now an organics material bin, a fourth bin?
Commissioner Kearns, don't quote me. I'd need to have Deb back me up. There's somebody from the solid waste back me up, but I understood that this would be part of the yard waste bin.
Okay.
But even then, I would imagine not all your consumers or all your constituents have those. That's not a requirement, I wouldn't imagine, but now it would be. And so that's the mechanical issue of this. So there's all kinds of things surrounding this. There's human behavior issues. There's some fairness issues to this. Some people recycle their organics on their own, but yet then they'd be having to pay into the system conceivably, even though they wouldn't be using it. Then the size of the bin, I have one at my house and it's a big one. I don't really know that I want another one. So there's those types of things to consider, though, of course, not Spokane County where I live. But anyway, so there's those. And then there's also the weather. When things freeze, there's an issue with, does the waste, can you manage it properly when it's frozen? So a lot of unknowns, both from the mechanical side, and then I guess I'm calling that the mechanical side, and then just the implementation and then the cost. So we'll revisit this. Like I said, the hearings this week, I want to get through that and kind of see where things are at, and then relay to our delegation if we want to weigh in on that.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
And I guess I would say, not to mention the smell of having something like that in your garage. So then you'd want to put it outside your garage, which would then lead to animals wanting to get into those bins.
Yes, all valid concerns. The next two are parks related bills, and I asked Mr. Chase to join, so you'll see him there. I'm going to try to cover 1925, and then he's going to fix it if I make any mistakes in the way I'm describing it. But at the end of the day, it deals with the infractions that you can impose, the county can impose in their parks. Right now, the penalty is pretty severe, and I'll let Doug talk more about that. But we spoke yesterday, and in some ways, this is trying to make a penalty more commensurate with the violation that happens in a park. And if it were a nail, hitting it with a hammer instead of a really, really big sledgehammer. So I'll let Doug kind of articulate that a little better, if that's okay.
Right. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, commissioners, we stumbled into this. Mr. Knowles and Mr. Evans were, when we're doing a study and looking into providing for e-bikes. You might recall how popular e-bikes have become in our park system, and our current codes do not provide for that. So in going through that planning process, Mr. Knowles and Mr. Evans realized that the only offense we have is a criminal misdemeanor offense. And quite frankly, that's very, very heavy-handed. And so enforcement becomes somewhat non-existent, or very, very limited to non-existent, if you will, because we just aren't into criminal offenses. So this change would decriminalize, if you will, and provide an option for a much lesser penalty, and provide tools to counties similar to what is in place for municipalities right now.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Doug on that? Mike?
No, so the bill was introduced, Representative Bowles dropped it. It has not been scheduled for a hearing. I'm wondering though, if this is something as a board you'd like to support going forward.
Maybe it just didn't click with me. You started from e-bikes to talking about infractions in parks. I guess I'm not quite getting the connection here on what this bill does. I see Casey.
We'll bring in the expert, Mr. Evans.
Yeah.
I apologize. I didn't quite track there with what this bill does.
So about a year ago, Doug gave me a project, and they were trying to, a number of parks that we have, they were getting a lot of issues with e-bikes on certain trails, and so they wanted to, prohibit e-bikes on certain county parks trails because they were causing a lot of problems, damage to the trails. The other mountain bikers were getting very upset, and Doug said, "What tools do I have?" Well, in researching the law, the only tool that Doug has in the event that someone, like say we say no e-bikes on a county, in this county park or on this county trail, the only tool that Doug has is for his park rangers to write them a misdemeanor ticket, which means, I'm sorry, you rode your e-bike on the trail. Now you got to go to court and fight this criminal misdemeanor violation. And for the offense, it seems pretty heavy-handed. What's interesting after further research is the municipalities, like the city of Spokane with their park rangers, they can write all sorts of tickets, for parks violations that are civil infractions. as well, I mean, the county park officers can write like parking tickets, for example, that are civil infractions, but for any other type of, infractions, bikes don't necessarily fit into the definition of a vehicle or motor vehicle under the parks code anyway. So in looking at the statute, the statutes statewide, county parks are only able to, issue misdemeanor tickets. And so in speaking with Representative Volz, this pretty significant punishment. Misdemeanor citations of this nature are usually revenue negative. Civil penalties are better fit, may also be revenue positive, and less punishment as well. Volz has indicated that the other side of the aisle as well has been open to this idea because it would give counties more tools that are not criminal, with that type of hammer to enforce provisions of their code. So we drafted this up. We just added a new section to the parks statute regarding penalties for violations of county codes. And we just added one section that says that we're parks or county commissioners are able to promulgate rules which would permit a parks ranger or parks department to write civil infractions pursuant to RCW 7.80.
Okay, thank you.
So Doug, so you'd be in support of us supporting this?
Yes, please. That would be fantastic.
Okay, and Mike, has this gone to Wasac to talk about with other counties?
No, it's funny. Doug and I talked about this, Doug, midsummer maybe, in late summer, and I ran it by a few colleagues, didn't get any comments back that it was a negative. I think that's probably why you're asking, Commissioner. Also, Doug shared it with someone that a colleague of mine that lobbies for parks systems broadly. And he didn't indicate that he would have any issue with it. It was just a thanks for the heads up. And he's pretty engaged in those issues. So if he had had an issue, I think we would have heard about it. So, I certainly wouldn't bring this to you, commissioners, if I thought there was a problem with it for you. I think that it makes sense that, you're mirroring what cities can already do. And it, fits with some of the things that Mr. Evans just spoke about. So I don't see a downside with it at this point. And I think, using me to help shepherd it through the process I don't see a downside right now. Does that help?
Yeah, yes, no, it's helpful. So you're just looking for a head nod from the three of us.
Yeah.
To move it forward?
For me to do the work behind the scenes. I'll coordinate with Doug when the bill gets a hearing and those types of things, and just work with him to move it through the process.
Okay, Commissioner Kearns?
No, I'm fine with that. I would support that.
Okay.
Commissioner French?
I likewise.
Okay, I will do so then. The next one is interesting. This is reducing emissions of outdoor power equipment. Don't confuse this with another bill that was introduced that got some press that deals with kind of more homeowner use. Like there's one bill that's floating around out there that you can get a rebate if you turn in an old gas powered lawnmower and go purchase an electric one. You'd get a rebate. This is not that. There was a bill that, like I said, got some press coverage that I saw at least about that. This one's different. The bill would levy a tax, an additional tax on the purchase of carbon emitting equipment. But the bigger problem for the county would be there is a section in the bill that bans the purchase of that type of equipment and getting into the heavier stuff. That's why Doug's here. That I assume they use in your parks and the golf courses. In 2025, you would not be able to purchase that equipment anymore. So Doug, if you have any kind of reasons why that's problematic, I'm sure it's pretty self-explanatory for you commissioners, but if Doug can fill in a few blanks, that'd be great.
Yep, you bet. In short, the type of equipment that we purchase, the power equipment that we use and need to maintain parks and golf courses, it is not available. Many pieces are not available in an electric version. Now we're excited when Tesla throws out a lawnmower. We're going to be really excited about that. But to the best of our knowledge, it's simply not available, and it would create a huge challenge if we were unable to purchase equipment that did not exist.
So, and Doug is joined in those comments by parks directors statewide, I have to assume. It's not an opposition to going carbon free. It's just a realization that this equipment out there is not out there. Especially I would have imagined at the more commercial level. I know you can buy gas powered lawnmowers for my own yard, but I don't think that's practical yet for maintaining a park or something like that. So that's the issue we have there. Wondering, commissioners, if you did want to oppose that bill for those reasons and join that coalition of folks that are working against it.
I will look to Commissioner Kearns and Commissioner French. I would be happy to oppose it.
Yes,
Likewise would oppose it.
yeah, I would too. I would like to, if I can just double back. I mean, as we're going through these, I just want to make sure with 1925 is to give it's to give our park rangers the ability to write lesser level infraction. This bill does not ban the e-bikes, correct?
No.
Just so I know I have that correct. I know we talked about one, but it was in relation to an e-bike, and I'm sure that's another discussion I think we need to have at another day about the use of those, of the bikes on our county park, because they're not banned today, are they?
Technically, our guidelines do not provide for the e-bikes, and that's why we were studying the issue. And it came up that technically they're in violation of our park code. It's simply the code wasn't written with electric bicycles in existence, and therefore it doesn't clearly provide for them. And in some cases, it may in fact be interpreted as those being prohibited. There's different levels of electric bicycles, size, power, how fast they go, how large the tires are. And so we did a thorough study, Mr. Knowles led up, and have some recommendations, but at the end of the day, we bumped into an inability to have any type of enforcement tools beyond a criminal offense. So
Okay.
Separate from this legislation that is being proposed, our code has an issue with e-bikes, and Casey Evans is going to help clarify what I tried to explain.
Okay, I was just gonna say, I mean, I am by no means an expert on these on e-bikes. If they're becoming as common as it makes it sound, that we're asking the legislature to give us an ability to write a lesser infraction because they're so prevalent. I mean, I don't know, maybe this is something we, at a later time,
Certainly.
have a discussion about. Do we actually need, should they be banned? Should they be allowed? Should there be a
Right.
middle ground here?
Yeah.
I mean, if they're this popular, I don't know if we want a
Of the
full-out ban.
three types, two of them, the recommendation is to accommodate. There's just one type that is more similar to a motorcycle in size and weight and speed and power. And again, we'll definitely look forward to bringing that before you
Okay.
at a future meeting to share the study and the recommendations and along those lines.
Okay, because I know you referenced damage to the trail, and I mean clearly, if there is some type of vehicle or bike that is damaging our trails, I mean that's one thing. But if there's a way to safely operate them to where they don't, then I think that
Yeah.
shouldn't be banned. So okay, but
Correct.
for another day,
Correct.
thank you. I just wanted to double check that we weren't in passing or in supporting this legislation, we weren't also supporting the outright ban of these. So okay, I just
No.
wanted to clarify that.
Not at all.
Okay.
You were going to clarify?
Yeah, I wanted to just show you, it's so the language that we're adding, it says basically it said, the statute says that as except as otherwise provided, any person violating any rules or regulations adopted by the Board of County Commissioners relating to parks, playgrounds, or other recreational facilities is guilty of a misdemeanor. The new provision that we're asking to add, or asking the legislature to add, is for rules or regulation violations under this chapter that do not warrant criminal penalty, the Board of County Commissioners may establish civil infractions in accordance with chapter 7.80. So all this statute would do is give the Board of County Commissioners more authority to promulgate rules for infractions. The e-bikes were just sort of the brainchild of this. You know, it's just one issue. Some of these e-bikes go 24 miles an hour, you know, without pedal assist. So they're more like a motorcycle. The e-bikes just sort of brought this idea about, you know, there are other, you know, things that happen in county parks other than e-bikes where a crime might not be appropriate, you know, for a violation, but the park rangers don't really have a lot of discretion. You know, they can only write a criminal ticket. And so a lot of times these things go unenforced. You know, maybe like defacing a sign or something like that might be more appropriate. You know, maybe an infraction is more appropriate than a crime, or maybe not. But it would, this would just give the county commissioners the ability to promulgate rules and enable the parks rangers to, you know, write tickets essentially, and give us the same powers that misdemeanor or municipalities have in terms of with parks.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay. And then last, I want to kind of update on the what's going on with police reform bills. The first bill there, though, is not a police reform bill. That is House Bill 1202. That is left over from last year. That bill deals with the civil remedies for persons injured as a result of police misconduct. There is a real big concern from local governments about this bill for liability. It has a lot to do with, you know, along the lines of liability arguments that we've talked about in the past with joint and severable, any number of topics, who has the right to sue, who has standing, and those types of things. So there's a real cost components to that one that are concerns. WASAC is relaying that. I've offered to provide them any support when it comes to that issue. But just wanted to make you aware of that one, that it is left over from last year. The next three, though, are bills that aim to make changes to the bills that were passed last year. The first there is the use of acquisition military equipment. That's bill sponsored by Representative Bernowski. He's out of the Lakewood area in Tacoma. And it clarifies the law that enforcement officers can use less lethal alternatives such as beanbag rounds fired from a rifle. I think there was some concern that departments were getting this equipment and were worried that they couldn't use them. So this is a bill to clarify that. It has pretty broad support from law enforcement. So I think that bill goes in the right direction with what your department would want. The next one, 1735, is a bill by Representative Johnson from Federal Way. He was a leader in the police reform movement last year. This one clarifies when an officer has the authority to use physical force to the extent needed in cases where it deals with the Involuntary Treatment Act, taking a minor into protective custody, or other behavioral health statutes. The issue there was that, I'm sorry?
So when you're done speaking to this, Sheriff Knezevich is actually on as well, that wants to speak to it as well.
Oh, I'd love to hear his input for sure. And then, okay, I'll go quick because it's more important to hear from him than me. So 1735 is a bill that I believe has support from the law enforcement community. There are still some technical issues, I believe, that Sheriff Knezevich's association has with that, wanting to make those different cases. As I mentioned, the Involuntary Treatment Act, there's other parts of the statute where behavioral health statutes are in play. My guess is that you'll hear that they'd like to see those broadened. Then the last bill, 1726, from Representative Goodman, allows the use of physical force when there's reasonable suspicion that an individual's committed certain offenses. And that bill has, there's more controversy surrounding that bill right now, mostly coming from what I would call the folks that were advocating for these changes last year are more apprehensive and have issues with 1726. I think in their words, they would say that that bill brings the law that was passed last year backwards. But again, I'd really like to hear what our sheriff has to say about that.
Well, thank you for bringing me back in. Let's talk about House Bill 1202 first, though. Commissioners, I will tell you that this is the biggest threat there is in the state of Washington to the retention and hiring of future law enforcement officers. And this deals with qualified immunity, and the activists want the public to believe that the public can't sue law enforcement for being hurt during a use of force situation. As you know, that is a fallacy. You see those lawsuits come through all the time, and you know at times how frivolous those lawsuits are. So the entire concept is based on this fallacy that you cannot sue a police officer. The problem is what this does is opens up not only the officer, but the county or the municipalities to extreme civil liability, because this bill actually says that we're supposed to have some kind of crystal ball and be able to know that our actions that we do today may sometime down the future be deemed by a court, which happens all the time, to not fall within the Constitution. Well, when we did that act, it was within the parameters of the Constitution, and we now, several years down the road, i.e. 2 to 3 years down the road, a Supreme Court or the Ninth Circuit makes a ruling that changes our actions, you can now be sued for that. It literally is a futuristic type of action that we could end up getting sued for. And at the time we did it, it was within policy and procedure, it was within the constitutional guidelines, it was within state law. That carries an extreme problem for all of you. Here's the problem it has for me. When qualified immunity, this discussion on qualified immunity began, where I had a meeting with my field training officers, 20 of them in the room. This is basically a broad section of the sheriff's office. I asked the question, if qualified immunity were to be taken away, would you stay in law enforcement? 90% of those 20 that are a extreme representation of our agency, as in, when I say extreme, I mean, they talk for the bulk of the agency. 90% said they would leave law enforcement because they are not willing to put their family's livelihood and their family's futures at risk like that, to be sued for nothing, for one thing, and be pursued, personally for that. So this one is not as innocuous as some people may think it is. I can tell you that we targeted the state of Colorado because the state of Colorado did this. The state of Colorado is bleeding law enforcement officers to this day because of that action. Going into the next one, 1719, that is to clean up the shotgun issue. I think that we're doing okay with that, and I'm not going to speak too much to it because I think that one's been handled. The last two, though, are major problems. The state legislature and the activists behind them do not understand 80 years of Supreme Court doctrine on use of force. And they want to make use of force. The only time I can use force on somebody is if I have probable cause that to do so, like they've committed a crime. Well, there's many times that we come in contact with somebody that we don't have probable cause. We have reasonable suspicion that there's something going on, that they're about to or are committing a crime, but we don't have probable cause. Probable cause means that, we have the right to arrest them. This issue is causing major problems across the state. It is putting the lives of our citizens at risk, and it's putting the lives of your police officers at risk. This needs to be, if there's something the counties and the cities need to be fighting, is these two, actually 3 of the 4 are things that you need to be fighting to get fixed, because use of force is already very clearly defined by the United States Supreme Court. The doctrines have been there for 80 years, and there's not an issue with them. This is knee-jerk reaction at its highest, and it's causing a lot of problems, and it's causing a lot of safety issues for the citizens of this state. The one other aspect that I think that I wish they would have addressed was the pursuit reform that they did last year. I don't know if you're aware, but in the Valley, there was a situation where I believe it was 13 businesses were broken into one night. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage done. Our deputies watched this guy get into a vehicle, but we could not pursue him, because we can only pursue if it's a violent felony or if it's a DUI. We literally had to watch this guy drive away.
Sheriff, you should know. Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
That's how bad these bills truly are. And that bill has also led to an officer-involved shooting where we could have stopped this individual, but we couldn't pursue him because he took off on us. He had stolen license plates on his vehicle, therefore not a violent felony. He ends up crashing his vehicle down the road. We end up finding the crashed vehicle. We track him through the snow. He then breaks into a shop next to a residence and steals 2 guns, and then is involved in an officer-involved shooting with our deputies at that point when we find him. We could have ended that way before he broke into that family's garage. And we were very fortunate that that family was on vacation, because he was standing in front of their house when he took the actions that led to his being shot, and several rounds went into the house. We could have prevented that from happening had we had the right tools. These reforms have taken all the tools away from us to protect this community. That's really all I have.
Sheriff, you should know that there is a bill on pursuit that is being heard. I think it is being heard this week. So that's the aim, to deal with the pursuit issue. And that the prime sponsor of the one being heard is a former U.S. Marshal, Eric Robertson. You might be familiar with him. I know Todd is. So I think that's a good sign to deal with that. I just didn't put it on this list because it hadn't had its hearing yet or wasn't in the queue. So it's been added, but I'll make a note to keep the commissioners updated. So, I'm coordinating with my folks that I work with at the Association of Counties, and there is the political realities of these bills this year and what's passable, given the majority and the advocacy groups on the other sides of these issues. So, and I know you appreciate that, but just wanted to relay that to commissioners about some of what's happening in Olympia on those.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Kearns has a comment.
I was just going to say, Mike, that's great to hear that there is a bill regarding pursuit. And I mean, I'd like to suggest, I mean, if you can get the sheriff the information, I think what the sheriff just told us would be fantastic testimony on a bill like that, I think. So, I mean, if you'd be willing to testify on that bill with what exactly you just told us, I think that would be very compelling testimony for a bill like that.
Be more than happy to, Commissioner.
I will coordinate back with Todd if that's okay on that.
That's fine.
And then Mike, are you looking for us to say that we would not support 1202, we'd support 1719, not support 1735,
I think-
and not support 1726?
I think at this point, I want your opinion on 1202 and 1719. I understand, Sheriff, your positions on 1735 and 26, but they're kind of evolving. So before I come back to the commissioners, and I'd like to talk more with your office too about those, because those ones are more fluid. I think the other two are pretty clear where they're going to be. That's kind of a non-answer, Commissioner, but I think at this point, that's where I would go with these.
So on House Bill 1202, are we all three okay with not supporting that bill?
Yeah,
Yes,
Okay, so you have three head nods to not support that bill. On House Bill 1719, are people in favor of supporting that bill?
yes.
yes.
Yes. So there you go, Mike, you've got
Okay.
answers.
And then we'll revisit, and I'd like to coordinate with the sheriff's office on the other two as we move, as session keeps moving.
You know, and Mike, if I could have, there's another bill that I'd like if you could keep us up to date on this. I mean, that this regarding, I mean, very much related to law enforcement is 1692. This received substantial media attention a couple weeks ago. This is to lessen the severity of punishments for drive-by shootings, which I think this is just an absolute despicable bill. I mean, that's a crime that is with total disregard for human life. I mean, I'm amazed that, you know, we even have a local legislator that has signed on to support this bill. And this is one that if this does get a hearing, which I hope it does not, I think this is one that, you know, we should certainly sign in opposed to.
Message received there, Commissioner. That bill has not received a hearing, and I heard the chair of the committee, that's Representative Goodman, publicly say he would not give that bill a hearing.
Good.
But message received. If something changes on that, I will bring it back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Is there anything else?
That's it. I appreciate the length of time. Sheriff, really appreciate your input on those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a nice day, Commissioners.
Thank
We'll
you.
be in touch soon.
Okay, that takes us, we're running a little behind schedule, but to Scott Chesney on an annual comp plan amendment. See Scott, there he is.
There we are. Took a second to load up here. Good morning. Commissioners, thank you. This is a pretty simple issue today. There is a leftover piece of our settlement agreement with FutureWise and the other plaintiffs that regarded the levels of service for detention and rehabilitation. Those were never really defined in our comprehensive plan, and that became part of the issue on this settlement agreement. With the establishment of the Spokane Regional Stabilization Center recently, with the county's support, partnering with the city, we were able to use that facility and both the program and the beds and the facility itself as a way of establishing levels of service, particularly for rehabilitation. That was deemed satisfactory by FutureWise and those in the settlement group. And so we brought that to you for a comp plan amendment, which is obviously not a land use issue, so there's not a map here. It's only a text amendment. It creates a new goal, comprehensive plan goals number 13, and it lays out what those levels of services are. The document in your resolution shows all of the elements of that goal 13, as well as the capital facilities program costs attached to it. So and by the way, the adoption of this can go outside of the normal cycle because it is part of our litigation settlement, not part of the annual comp plan amendments that you did in December. So this is pretty simple in the sense of we're adding this level of service using the stabilization center. It also is a major milestone on getting us out of our reaching agreement on our settlement agreement, which moves us back toward compatibility with Growth Management Act. So that's all we have before you today.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Scott? And that appears on our 2 o'clock agenda tomorrow, correct?
2 o'clock today, I believe.
Or 2 o'clock today. Yes, sorry, we're doing this all in one day. So,
It is. We're all off a day here.
yes. Okay, very good. Seeing no other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Gary Petrovich and Jeff McMorris to talk about ARP, possible consultant decisions and next steps.
Good
Jeff,
morning. Good
start.
morning, commissioners. Sorry, I don't have a lot of voice today. One thing you've probably seen in the press over the last week, the city of Spokane hired Moss Adams to help with ARP process. There's more capacity issues with ARP than there were with the CARES grants, as I think you guys are aware. We've had a conversation last week with budget, grants, legal, purchasing. One thing that we are not able to do is completely piggyback on the city contract unless we have the exact same scope of work, which we are looking at possibly doing a different scope of work. But before we reach out to different firms in the local area or national firms that have reached out to us, we just wanted to have this discussion with the 3 commissioners to make sure you're comfortable with this approach to getting some help with ARP process. Gary was going to talk through a bit more of the details, and then Heather Arnold from the grants office is also available if you guys have some specific questions.
Thank you, Jeff.
Go ahead, Gary. I'll let you start, and then I think I've got lots of questions.
Sure, Commissioner, thank you. Well, as Jeff alluded to, and as you probably well know, based on briefings in the past about the ARP program, it will require quite a bit of in-depth knowledge about screening some of these requests for applicability and then downstream tracking and subsequent audit. And a lot of this has to go through an RFP type of process, which is a lot different than the CARES funds. So now that we're all understanding this process a little bit better, it would behoove us to take a look at a firm or firms that do this in conjunction with a contract, so that there's consistency in deciding whether or not those applications qualify per se. Now, the way the city had structured their contract with Moss Adams was on a per hour pay basis. So that their contract was a little over $100,000, but it was based on a billing rate for their professional staff and who worked on it and for what purposes. And the city envisioned using them to offset any gray area requests that came in, that then they would be referred to Moss Adams for screening and applicability. If we wanted we are not able to piggyback on that if we want more latitude with the parameters of how we would structure a contract with other sources to provide maybe a larger scope of services. For instance, to be able to do some auditing downstream, and then to also look at, instead of selectively looking at applications, to have them funnel, for instance, all of the viable applications instead of just selectively picking and choosing. Now, there's some companies that do this naturally, but not a lot of them. And when I understand that the city went out for RFPs, they really only received this one contract from Moss Adams. They are a firm locally, as you well know, They claim they have the expertise to do the screening, and they have the credentials listed of the people that were working on their contract, and they seem suitable to the project at hand. Now, that being said, the reason for the briefing is to understand what the commissioners want from this process. And if we could perhaps piggyback from other cities or entities that have used other agencies for contracting, maybe we would have the ability to piggyback on those. But if we don't, we would have to go out separately for RFPs.
Okay, I'll ask my other commissioners first if they have any questions. Mr. French?
Yeah, I would, based upon how the city handled their rental assistance programs and some other programs, even as it relates to CARES, the fact that they still don't have their rental assistance money out, I would rather be independent and find our own consultants. And clearly we're going to have a different scope of activities than the city's going to be involved in. So I'd rather go out with a separate RFP if needed, find a firm that can help us. What exactly are they going to do, Gary, in this process? Are they just going to audit, or are they actually going to be involved in the selection of different projects?
Well, again, that comes to the scope. As far as the selection of projects, no. They would just be looking at the qualifications for applications that would come in under whatever project scope is listed or applicable under ARP. So they would take it and screen it and say, you would be in compliance with this request, and understanding that you have the capacity to be able to move forward and do this based on your resources. So it wouldn't be them choosing what categories or that sort of thing. That would be up to the board to decide within your project listing to start the process, and how much money you wanted allocated in each of those categories. Now, for each of those categories, then you'd have to go out with an RFP to see what companies then would submit. And those companies that would submit then would be screened. That's my vision of how this would work for them being able to actually abide by the provisions of the ARP process.
So I guess for me, Gary, so just so I get my clarity. So they would be providing kind of an initial screening to say that based on the Treasury guidance that this would meet, whatever section of those 5 buckets would be a valid use of those funds. And then it would come back to us to determine if we feel that meets, what we want to choose to spend those dollars on or not. But then that gives us the ability that it should then pass an audit because they've given it that, kind of the qualifications that it meets the criteria. Is that what you're saying?
You're correct. And it would be the central funneling point instead of them submitting, people in a haphazard manner submitting applications to each of the commissioners or to Jeff or to Erica. Here would be a central funneling point where would we identify one source for all requests coming in, so that then that they would have to pass that initial screening based on the category that they're applying for. And it's at that point, the end product would then give you the net information that you would need to make the decisions on who to award the projects to.
Okay. So they're just providing consulting services for that piece. All right. You were saying with the city, I guess so I understand that piece. Is there additional pieces that you're wanting to contract out?
Perhaps, and that would be predicated on the number of awardees that the board would decide to use. So for instance, if you're only looking at a handful of awardees for the ARP funds, that's one thing. But if you're looking at hundreds or 100 awardees, then we don't have the capacity to be able to audit all of these in the manner in which is prescribed by the ARP for things similar to grants. We just don't have the staff unless we want to hire a lot more people.
So having a consulting firm that can help us scale up or not, like Gary said, a lot of it will depend on how many categories the board chooses. Because a very different process if we're managing a dozen or two versus 100 or 200. And that's part of what we need to figure out as we move forward in this process, and you and the board, you guys start making those decisions.
So I guess one of the questions is, are there other firms that are doing this? You know, locally, I'm sure there are nationally, but locally. And I guess I would like to try to keep our dollars local as much as possible.
Commissioner, the only firm locally that I know that's doing this is Moss Adams and maybe Clifton Larson Allen.
Commissioner Kearns, I see you unmuted. Are you?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I've all kind of expected we would be hiring a firm to assist with this. That was just always my assumption. But I would think I've been contacted by some firms other than Moss Adams. So like, I know there are other entities out there. I'm surprised that the city only got one, because I've had groups reach out, major firms reach out and kind of with their solicitations. So I'm surprised the city only got one. That's kind of surprised. And I don't know, maybe it's because these firms are only looking at 100 million and up, maybe, I mean, I don't know if it's just based on the dollar amount that we have to allocate. Maybe that's why, but I don't know. I know last summer I spoke with a Scott and I actually attended an event where one of the firms was there, and kind of, I mean, it wasn't a hard pitch, but it was just a, hey, we're here, we're interested in, in helping communities allocate their ARP dollars. So I don't know, that I find that interesting that the city only got one. So.
Well, Commissioner, I think that we would probably get more than one through the RFP process. And, I think that there's a lot more firms now that, like you said, are interested in this type of work. And so by going out with an RFP, I think that would answer your questions about how many people and where would they come from and how qualified they'd be that would be interested in this kind of a contract.
Commissioner French?
So if an applicant for ARP funds had submitted a proposal that had an element in it that involved distributing some of these funds to folks in the community for whatever reason, the accounting firm would then basically say, this entity has the capacity to do what they said they were going to do in their response to the RFP. Is that what they're going to do, or are they going to actually analyze the method proposed for distributing funds? Or I guess I'm still a little confused about just exactly what the consultant is going to do. I understand if they're going to audit to ensure that the funds were distributed in the way as envisioned, but when it comes to the selection process, I'm a little vague on exactly what it is they're going to do for us.
Well, Commissioner, that's a good point to bring up, and that would be part of the RFP process on identifying the scope of their duties and responsibilities and their work for the county. It's important that they establish for the fact that these are credible organizations that are going to be looking for this money, and we're distributing millions of dollars to them. An example might be that if you pick a company that doesn't have the resources to administer and spend the funds correctly, and they're also distributing funds to other people, a sub recipient, so to speak, that ultimately the county is responsible for all of this stuff. And if they have inadequate staff to do their own auditing and following the guidance of the ARP, it falls back on the liability of the county. The county would ultimately be responsible under federal audit. So that's why it's important. It doesn't have to be an accounting firm. It could be a law firm, anyone with the expertise that you'd have any trust in, that they have the staff that would be able to adequately scrutinize the ability of these firms to not only get the money, but to adequately account for it and administer it.
So it seems like there's a lot of ways that we can go with this. We just have to, start having this discussion to think through what we want to look for and what we want to do for potential contracting out.
And you're correct, Commissioner. And it may be more than one contract. For instance, we may contract with a company to do one part of that. Maybe it's the audit that they do. And then the screening is another type of contract with another firm. Who knows what we'll get on the RFP, but we can break it down in that fashion also. Similar to what we did with the SAR, you RFP out different components of it.
And some of us, I think, will shake itself out as the three of you go forward with conversations around what buckets you want to fill, if they're buckets that are more black and white versus shades of gray. So some of it is we're looking for the head nod from you guys to see if you're comfortable with at least going out and seeing what's out there, what's available, what would be offered at different price points. Of course, it'll all come back for a final decision if you decide to go with the firm. We just don't want to spend the time if there's not interest from the board on at least exploring this avenue for dealing with the capacity issues that we may have if we have quite a few grants from the ARP funds.
So I'll look to my other commissioners first to see what their thoughts are on giving a head nod to having them just start to investigate what the possibilities are.
Yeah, I'm okay with you exploring just exploring what's out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would be okay with you at least asking the questions and find out, now that we've got the guidelines from the feds, maybe some of the accounting firms were waiting to find out what the feds were going to require before they jumped in. So maybe with that, there's greater clarity. So let's say, for instance, the county decided it was going to use some of its ARP funds to build a sewer line, just for laughs and giggles. This third-party accountant, what role would they? Well, one, does the county have to go through an RFP process to decide that it wants to build a sewer line? I guess that's a question for Jeff. And two, if we did, then what kind of service does this third-party accounting firm provide in that event?
Well,
if any?
A sewer line is probably going to be a sole source. It's not like choosing which fast food to go to for lunch. And so if it isn't like a sewer line that it really would be a sole source provider, then we likely would not have to do the RFP. And on that particular bucket, we wouldn't necessarily use that firm. Maybe we'd use a little bit for audit capacity. But on an example like that, we wouldn't need it. And if you're going to, I don't think this would be the case, but if you were to put all $100 million into sewer, we would likely not need a consulting firm.
Okay, thank you. I'm okay with exploring what the accounting firms here in town would be interested in providing.
Yeah, and I'm okay, exploring this idea, and I think Gary, with GFOA, there's probably some. I would think with Treasury finally giving the final guidance that there's going to be more coming down through the Government Finance Officers Association, as well as NACO, the National Association of Counties, on these topics, and as across the nation, everyone is starting to look at what they're going to be doing.
Okay, so we will, telling you, we'll focus on local firms, what's available, kind of what I'm hearing. Well, we can also let you know what national firms have reached out, and we'll see what's out there and bring it back around to you.
Well, and I think since it's going to have to go out for an RFP, we're going to have to, I mean, it's just going to be who's going to be, replying to those RFPs. I think that we'd all like to keep those dollars local as much as possible. So that just leads to kind of the other follow-up from that is, Jeff, before the holidays, you had met with each of the commissioners to talk about kind of ARP in the 5 areas and buckets. And so I don't think we've come back together to talk about that. So I'm thinking as we start to move forward, we need to probably have once a week an ARP discussion just to see where we're at, so we can start to look at what's kind of happening out there, what's happening with as the guidance is now culled through, looking at what this means to staffing, and kind of decide how do we want, because I think all the commissioners are getting, people sending in requests. And so how we want to handle those requests, even prior to a consultant or any of that. So I'm proposing that we start to add that to our agenda once a week to start to have those discussions. Any concerns with that from either of my commissioners? Mr. French?
No concern.
Okay, so then we will start to add that as kind of a standing item on our agenda till we get a plan, because we can't really spend any of this money till we have a start of a plan in place, and we don't have to have a final plan, as we discussed on Friday. We just have to start to have a plan and start to allocate some buckets, so we can look at what our future spending would be. Mr. French, I see you unmuted.
Yes, a question for Jeff. I know, Jeff, you put out a inquiry here, I think actually prior to Christmas, saying of the several buckets that we have, how much would we be willing to start out initially allocating for each one of those buckets? I know that I filled that out and delivered it to you. Have you got that from the other 2 commissioners, or if you do, then at some point are you going to share that with all 3 of us to see where we had common perspectives and where we didn't?
Yes, I got yours back. I heard from others they'd like to wait till after the COG meeting to get a bit more, hear that conversation. So I am hoping to circle back around and get those from the 3 of you in the next few days, because that could inform your conversation going forward. I can put it together. You guys can kind of see where there's similarities, where there's more discussions to be had. Another piece I'm hoping to pull together this week is we do have several dozen organizations who have proactively let us know they'd like ARP funding, even though we haven't put anything out for RFPs yet. And getting that into a document the 3 of you could look at, because if you see a project you're interested in, or of other projects you've heard from people in the community, that might influence where you decide to put money. You'll need to fund a bucket that they would qualify to apply for. So those are kind of the next 2 pieces. Erica has put together a nice spreadsheet. So I'm hoping to get you guys the details in advance, and we could also look at that spreadsheet at a meeting and flip through to jog your memory. And I think those are discussions that will help frame as we put together the first draft of a plan for you guys to look at.
Is Commissioner French asking about just where you would have the spreadsheet just saying how much of the current 51 million we got, how much we wanted to begin with spending? Is that same deal?
Yeah, that's the same one.
Okay.
You can handwrite it in, or it's formulaic if you want to do it online. I sent around an Excel spreadsheet with it, as well as the hard copy.
Oh, I don't think I saw the email. Okay.
It was right before Christmas. You may have been otherwise occupied.
And I foresee that being one of the first things that, yes, we would be talking about as we start to move forward, just to see what our thoughts were. So, so hopefully I have not gotten mine into Jeff. We've discussed it, but I will finalize mine and get it into Jeff this week. So if we can do that, be helpful, and then we can, at least starts the conversation as to where our thoughts are. But we will add a section to the agenda, like I said, once a week till we get a plan in place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate your work on that. Thank you, Heather, for being here. I guess I didn't ask if you had any thoughts or comments that you wanted to add.
Nope, I was just here if you guys needed anything because Erica's out sick today.
Okay, thank you very much for being here.
No problem.
Okay, so that's going to take us to miscellaneous, and we're running behind. So I'm going to skip the first item of reviewing the agenda and board committee follow-up, because I'm not sure why that's there. The BOC hearing room update. So I think, Jared, you were going to give us an update on where we're at with the hearing room and the equipment.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I'll make it quick and say that it's a good news, bad news situation. The good news is that they're about 50% complete with the construction of the new equipment. In fact, they are down there. There's 2 gentlemen down there today doing some installs. And things are looking good, especially things like that new TV screen that we have for the display item for the entire hearing room. That is up and it looks great. Unfortunately, the last update I gave you said that the equipment that was delayed on shipping containers that we need for things like the crow's nest and the video cameras and switchboards, they went from being delivered in February to completely being taken off any kind of TBD as far as delivery. So I have asked the vendor to provide us with some other options, or to at least keep us updated with when that equipment can get in. So as of right now, I don't have an update on when it'll be completed, but work is being done, and we're trying to assess what our options are to get some of the equipment that we need. We have 75% of the equipment here physically in the hearing room. However, that 75%, they depend on the 25% that's missing for things like switchboards and, like I said, the camera and things like that. So that's where we're at, and hopefully within the next week or 2, I should be able to provide a better update on a timeline.
Okay. Thank you. So in the meantime, we're still here in this conference room. Okay. Thank you for that. So then that leads me to talking about, since we can't get into the hearing room, in-person public meetings discussion, since we're going to be here. I think I've gotten notice that from legal counsel that we want to maybe delay that till this afternoon. Is that correct, Scott?
That is correct. Please.
Or Mark, is that, I guess, Mark, you're on the line, so.
I am. That's completely fine, Commissioner. Thank you very much. We'll probably be better this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll have that discussion this afternoon. After the consent agenda, we will move that to our miscellaneous items there. And so Scott, then the 8th Avenue purchase and sale agreement update.
Yeah, just a quick update. We had planned on presenting to the commissioners a potential addendum for the 8th Ave building purchase and sale agreement, but it's I just heard from Jim and Macy this morning that's still a bit in flux. So just as a quick reminder, we have the current purchase and sale agreement with the most recent addendum, extended the buyer's feasibility study through, I believe it's today, if I'm not mistaken, Jim, and you can correct me. They've indicated that they need some more time. They're still working on on discussions with the potential lessee that they want to lease the entire building to. So when we agreed to the extension of the due diligence period, we also included an extension of the close. So the close went from April 30th to May 31st with an option for the county to extend that for another 30 days. So I believe we're working with the buyer's agent, which is also the county's agent, to look at what their potential proposal might be. They are indicating it needs more time. So I don't think we're at a point right now to have the anything for action from the board. Perhaps this afternoon, we will have some more information to be able to share with you. Is there anything I missed, Jim, on that? Still muted.
Thank you very much, Scott. I apologize. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
You are correct in what you're stating. Board members, the issue here is complex because the Jaffa, the potential purchaser, is negotiating with the Spokane Regional Health District to lease the building. And the health district needs to make improvements to the building before they move in. And they want the county and all the tenants out of the building before they start their improvements. And Kathleen is working very hard to find locations for the present units of her organization which are in the building. And the locations which she is looking at require substantial tenant improvements. And so the fine point here is Jaffa wants the county out of the building as soon as possible, but Kathleen can't move out of the building into her new locations until the tenant improvements in those locations are completed and they're satisfactory to the Department of Health. And so we've got kind of a difficult situation here. Kathleen wants to extend the closing time frame, which is the date which we have to be out of the building, to as long as possible. Jaffa wants us out of the building as soon as possible. And so that's the conundrum, if you will, board members, that we're trying to work through right now. Mr. Crosby represents both Jaffa and the county. And right now, we are not necessarily in agreement to extend the due diligence date from today, which is the January 18th. They want to extend it till February 14th. And we're not opposed to doing that, but if they want to extend the due diligence date, we want to extend, if you will, the closing date to give Kathleen sufficient time to relocate her units into new facilities. Jaffa is not in agreement with necessarily extending the closing date because they want us out as soon as possible. So we're trying to work through a solution, board members, so I can take to the chair of the board an addendum which is acceptable to Mr. Hall and Ms. Torella to extend the due diligence date. And as we both know, once the due diligence date passes, if they don't close the transaction, they lose $200,000 in a security deposit.
I've also asked Tony to join because I anticipated the board would like to get a better understanding of where our leasing efforts for relocating our community services group are going along. So Tony, could you provide a quick overview of where our leasing efforts are today?
So for half of Kathleen's team, we're in the final stages of negotiating a building on Augusta owned by Hutton Settlement. So that is very closely coming to an end. But back to what Jim said, we really want that due diligence period to end so that we have financial backing to enter into a lease. So at least in my mind, I'm sure yours as well, we would not want to enter into a lease if if we didn't have financial backing from the sale of that building. So right now, Jaffa could pull out at any time, and
we would lose the deal and then we would be stuck into a lease. So that's why we want to wait until after the due diligence period is up and we at least have, the county would have $200,000 of backing to enter into a lease. So the second half of Kathleen's team is looking into some property in the valley. They're in the early stages of that, but hopefully, I would say by the end of June, we're looking good for both of her teams to be out.
So we'll have, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, can you tell me which of Kathleen's teams are in the building? Because at one point they were 100% telecommute. So are we talking the stars or are we talking her cares team? Who's in the building?
Stars is in the building. They are independent. They're not a county entity, but there's also the cares division is currently in person. And then a few of Kathleen's administrative personnel are on the 4th floor, I believe.
Okay, so how many, so then excluding stars, how many actual people are in the building? Like, I mean, are we talking 10? Are we talking 50? I mean, how many people are we talking?
I would assume over 10, well under 50.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yep.
So we will, depending on how the communications go between now and 2 o'clock, we may have something further for the board with regards to the request on any addendums to the feasibility extension and the close date and our recommendations on it. So nothing for action right now, board.
So Scott, as we look to this afternoon to discuss this further, then I guess I'm, with Commissioner Kearns, and that how many people are we really talking about? Is there a way to get the CARES people at a temporary location, even here on our site, which is accessible by bus? Because I know that's part of the requirements is having it be accessible for these people to come into by bus, that we can at least temporarily have them so we can, get this building sold and taken care of.
Yeah, so I'm kind of playing back some of Tony's comments and he can add some more, but it's certainly it's a chicken and the egg here. And it sounds like we've got some pretty good progress on the CARES group of her team in a location that would be accessible by transit, good access for not only the public who interacts with them, but also their employees. It may be something that we just have to take a little bit of a risk evaluation and say, well, we don't necessarily have a place for the administrative end of our organization who is doing both some remote, some in person, which they've worked pretty well on reducing the footprint in a building. That may be one that we can provide a recommendation of whether we think it's a appropriate step to go ahead and close and vacate the building by a period of time. There is some technology and equipment, Tony, if I'm not mistaken, that has to be relocated. That's very critical. There's some HIPAA protections and other client confidentiality that is playing in this as well. And I don't have as much detail on that, but Tony, you might be able to provide some additional.
Yeah, so again, I won't do this as much justice as Kathleen would if she was here, but the general gist is that the CARES division cannot move any of their servers, any of their files until basically they have a 90-day window from when we enter into a lease to when the Department of Health inspects and approves the use of a new building. So that is why Kathleen cannot move at least the CARES division for at least 90 days.
And Tony, in addition to that, as the board is aware, the Department of Health has substantial requirements that the new space needs to meet before they will even approve Kathleen relocating the CARES unit, if you will, board members. And that is the dilemma that we're dealing with right now, because almost every space that Kathleen has looked at needs to be updated to meet the, if you will, CARES standards in order to be certified to be used for that purpose.
And Commissioner Cuny, I know Tony's got a nice kind of a timeline document that he's worked on that shows kind of the sequence of decision making that needs to take place, and then the eventuality of the lease agreements. That might be something good to review with the commissioners this afternoon, and we can share where there's some where you can inform on and make some decisions on to say, listen, we realize that a perfect scenario is we've got all leases secured, we've moved out, and then Jaffa can finalize their due diligence period and begin doing the tenant improvements for the eventual lessee. And there might be some areas I would suspect that we can make a calculated decision to say, we know it's not all as clean as we'd like it to be in terms of timing, but we're willing to take a little bit of a risk to say these other things will happen if we just kind of draw a line in the sand here and say, let's move forward with entering into our lease agreements, and then believing the other things will fall into place with regards to the closing of the transaction.
Thank you. And I do just want to clarify that as most people know, I sit on the Hutton Settlement Board. I did recuse myself this last board meeting for discussions and the vote on looking at a potential lease with Spokane County Community Services. And I will do the same from this perspective, that as any lease comes up, you know, if there's a lease agreement with that, then I will recuse myself here as well.
Okay, so we'll touch base in this afternoon and see if there's some additional information we have from the buyer that would help to inform on some of the decisions.
Thank you. We'll tee that up for this afternoon as well then. If there's any additional information. A couple things that I do have miscellaneous that has come to my attention from Gina is looking at interview dates for the Board of Health with my other two commissioners. It looks like the only times that we have come up with that the Board of Health attorney is available, as well as the rest of us, would be Friday, the 21st after 5 p.m. So Friday evening, and Saturday, January 22nd. I think she has all day. We're anticipating 4 hours. As Mayor Freeman said at the Board of Health meeting, that he's not available the following week. So if we can't make those dates work, then we will need to look to that first week of February.
I can make Friday or Saturday work.
Okay.
Do we know, can Mayor Freeman make those work?
Okay, we will check and get back. We'll find out for us first, and then we'll check with Kevin. I guess we'd already checked with Kevin, but.
Can I ask, and I don't know if this is a question for Mark or Amicia. So if Kevin cannot make it, the way the legislation writes is that is a panel of the health board, not the entire health board, correct? So
That's
if
right.
the three of us did the interviews absent of Mayor Freeman, we would not be getting sideways with the legislation. Is that
No,
correct?
I don't believe you would be. No, I think you'd be
Okay.
fine.
All right. I think it's important that we have the health board in place and we don't skip a January meeting. I would like us to hold a January health board meeting.
So it looks like my schedule, I'm available both Friday evening and Saturday.
Yeah, I likewise don't have a life.
Exactly. Okay, so none
It's
of us
not
have a life.
It's not that you don't have one. It's just, this is it. The commissioner is your life.
It's that I have a life that nobody wants.
Okay, so we will check in with Mayor Freeman and see if we can make those work, and then hopefully our, interview the candidates that we're going to be interviewing, we'll be able to make that too. So I'm going to ask if we feel like we need to, can we do both Friday evening and Saturday, so that way we can try to, because we've got several people to try to get times on it. Is that okay if we need to go that route?
I can make it work.
Okay.
Yeah, if we are going to do the interviews on Saturday, it would be nice to be able to do them in the morning, just in case Gonzaga gets a game in the afternoon.
Just saying, right? Will it be in
Just
town?
saying. Just saying.
No, okay, so we'll shoot for Friday evening or Saturday morning, or a little bit of both if we need to do it. Thank you. Because I too feel it's important to try to get those, candidates in place and the board in place, for the next board meeting. That leads me to, is there any other miscellaneous, Scott? I'm going to check with you first.
I do have something really quickly, Commissioner, just for awareness of for the other commissioners and kind of a public acknowledgement. We had a couple of individuals who are resigning from the county, and they've provided a number of years of service for the county and the community. One is Maggie Yates, who's our regional law and justice administrator. She's resigned and will be leaving, I believe, the end of this week, if I'm not mistaken. Maggie has filled a role for about 2.5 years, working on some initiatives for and on behalf of the county and the city. We do have an interlocal agreement with the city of Spokane to jointly share in the costs of that position. So I think it's a good point in time to do an evaluation of what we're looking for, what the commissioners are looking for, what the community is looking for with those efforts going forward. So we'll be taking some time to do that. The next person is Mike Hermanson. Mike has been with the county for about 15 years, working in our environmental services group, now our public works team. And Mike has resigned to pursue an opportunity with Vista, actually. And that'll be a pretty big loss for us as well. Mike is a statewide recognized expert in water, all things water resources, and has provided really great support and work for the commissioners, the county, and our community. So they'll both be missed. Want to just give a public acknowledgement to each of them and make sure that the commissioners had been aware of that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, both have been instrumental in what they both do, and Mike, having worked for the county for 15 years, and yeah, I mean, he's the one that I first, got to know quickly with all the water rights issues as commissioner, and so he's just been, instrumental in all of that. So that's going to be a big loss for us at Spokane County. And I guess with Maggie resigning, so then it really is looking at what that interlocal agreement is, and is that something that we should tee up with the commissioners then next week to have a discussion to talk about what to do there?
I think that could be helpful, Commissioner. The interlocal is I've chatted with Mark McLean on it, and there isn't anything in there that specifically says we have to act within a certain period of time to fill the position. While it's vacant, there will be less cost going to the city for them to provide in the sharing of the expenses. But I think that would be good to discuss kind of what's the future look like, what are the go forward strategies, where do the commissioners want to focus on, what kind of outcome-based evaluations do we want to do, data analysis, both pre and post these pilot programs, and be able to kind of step into it in that direction.
Thank you. Commissioner French, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, I saw the email from Maggie Yates notifying us of her desire to move on, and the thing that was most impressive from my standpoint is the list of projects that we've done under her leadership. And it is, when you think back over the years, and we hear from members in the community that says, well, what have you done? My God, she produced an incredible list of projects and improvements to the system. Now, there are a lot more things that need to be done. And as we all discussed when we changed the structure of the Spokane Regional Law and Justice Council to make those that could make the decisions in charge, the judges, the prosecutor, the public defender, and the sheriff, there's still a lot more to be done, but just kudos to Maggie. She came into this position with no definition, no predecessor. She created the job, and I think she did an outstanding job in that process and stuff. It is controversial. She did take an awful lot of flack because she constantly worked to get improvements in the system, and change is always difficult. And she encountered that time and time again. So I just want to say thanks, Maggie, for all your expertise, your leadership, and your diligence to get so many programs put into place that have improved the quality of the criminal justice system here. And then Mike has been a stalwart for water rights and fighting the fight to deal with the Hearst decision and being creative to look for solutions. That's, I think, what we all want to see out of our staff is find solutions, find the yes. Don't sit there and tell us why we can't do something. Tell us why we can, or what we have to do to get to yes. And Mike was one of those people. So I just want to say kudos to Mike and kudos to Maggie, and I wish both the most success in their future endeavors. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other miscellaneous items that anyone wants to bring up before the Board of County Commissioners?
I'll have a couple items for this afternoon, but I need to get a couple more things resolved. But I'll have a couple items for this afternoon.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, it is 11:07. And we will adjourn until our 2 o'clock consent agenda this afternoon. Thank you all.